Appalachia, a word that evokes a whole passel of reaction. Everything from the beauty of a mountaintop to trailer parks, drugs, and about everything in between. The Appalachian Mountains are indeed the oldest mountains in the world, and they once towered 30,000 feet into the air. They stretch from eastern Canada through 14 states all the way to Louisiana. The folks who live in these mountains have faced an unending number of tragic and just plain odd happenings that cry out for the telling. Hello, I'm Larry Bentley, and I was born and raised in these very mountains by a family who themselves were born, raised, and lived for generations in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Come with me, and we'll take a look at some of the unending stories that come from within my beloved mountains, and we'll take a look through the eyes of an Appalachian at some outside the area as well. Welcome to Season 5 of Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend. Howdy, my good friends. I hope you're doing well today. Thank you so much for swinging by. Now, I've always said that I believe one of the worst things a family has to go through is losing a loved one. Believe me when I tell you that when it happens, life as you know it, it's never the same. No matter how many years go by, that big empty hole left by the person that was there it just don't go away, and it's there from the day you lost them. It's bad enough to lose a loved one, even when you know why and who and how everything went and happened. I can't even begin to imagine having somebody taken away and having their life cut short by some slug of a piece of human dog squeeze, especially one that's never answered for it. And the case I got for you today is from Oak Hill, West Virginia. If you're heading up I-77 past Princeton, it'll turn to I-64 and you'll pass Cabin Creek, Flat Top, and Ghent. And then before you know it, you'll see the Oak Hill exit. It's a beautiful place to have something like I'm fixing to tell you about happen, but it did happen and it needs to be told. So grab you up a cold drink and have yourself a sit down, and let me tell you about Theresa Ann Wood. Theresa Ann Wood was born on April 6, 1972 in Montgomery, West Virginia, to Betty and Donald Woods. Montgomery sits a few miles west of Oak Hill. Theresa grew up not far away from Powelton, West Virginia, which is a little bit south of Montgomery. Teresa's dad owned a grocery store over in Kimberly, which is another one of them census areas that we talked so much about before. All of them places ain't but a hop, skip, and a jump from the New River Gorge, just to give you an idea of where we're talking about. Now, when Theresa was pretty young, her parents, Betty and Donald, stopped seeing things in the same light and ended up in divorce. I couldn't find an official reason, but if I had to guess, Donald was probably putting in some long hours running the store, and they just grew apart. And I reckon that we really can't know how exactly it affected Theresa. We do know that she was really quiet and pretty shy unless you really got to know her. She was a very loving person once you did, is what we've been told and what we read. Now, in 1985, Theresa and her mother and stepdad Rick Holcomb moved to Oak Hill, which is not far from Powelton. For Theresa, she had a pretty tight little group of friends, and she was really close to all of her family, there in Powelton and in the area there. So she was a pretty big thing, when she was 13 years old to be moving somewhere else. Now, at that point, all she really had was her mom, who became her best friend. And I've seen situations where that's an exceptionally good thing, and I've seen situations where it's a train wreck looking for a place to happen. It all depends on the parent. This one sounds to me like it was a pretty good thing from what all I've found. Now, in September of 1985, Theresa started school there in Collins Middle School, while her mom and stepfather went to work for a place called B&B Convalescence. Now, that's an ambulance service that picks up folks to take them to their doctor appointments or transfers them between hospitals and that kind of thing. Along about February of 1986, Theresa seemed like she was finally catching her stride and settling in there in Oak Hill. Now, the family lived in a trailer on Butler Street, which was owned by Betty and Rick's bosses, Robert and Billy Skaggs. Now, sounds like they got a good deal that included a place to live as part of their income package with the ambulance service. That sounds like a good deal, I guess, until the folks that's been there realize that they probably have an ambulance parked in the driveway and call can go off at any time, but it's their job to answer it. And yeah, well, you know what you're getting into when you're in that field of work and signing up for it, I reckon. But in reality, it probably was a good deal for him. It was a great deal for Theresa, too, because she met and started a friendship with the Skaggs' daughter named Angel. Now, on February 20th, 1986, the day started out like most any other day for Theresa. She woke up, and the first thing she did was messaged her mom saying that, or yes, sent a message down to her mom saying that she, well, didn't want to go to school that day. Her mom was, what parents would do today, told her that, you get ready because you needed to go. Now, she got all readied up for school by putting on her purple top, blue jeans, and blue jean jacket, and wore her jiggly earrings. Now, she did her red hair all up in style, and, just like one she saw in a magazine she was looking at. Now, when she walked in and asked her mom how she looked, of course, her mom said, oh, well, no doubt said, that she looked pretty as a peach. And they got in the car, and her mom drove her to school. Just before she got out, she hugged and kissed her mom and told her mom that she loved her before being on her way to school. Her mom would later say that you don't know how many times that I wished I'd just let her stay home that day. And you know that I wouldn't be saying that if everything went right today, would you? Now, Theresa went through her day there as always, and we remember how it was in school when we were little folks. You had folks to deal with, the ones who'd do and say about anything to anybody, thinking it was funny, but that was just school life back then and when I was a young feller anyway. After school, Theresa would usually walk from school to where her mom and stepfather worked, which was about a 17-minute walk. Now, we all remember that one too, because that's usually about the time that the bullies started up and we had to deal with them, which may or may not require a trip to the hospital for stitches or to set a broken nose, because some of them just couldn't learn any other way. But anyway, Theresa would usually meet Angel at the 7-Eleven, which was, right by Collins Middle School, and they would walk home together. But on February 20th, Angel brought some books home for her brother, Alan, who had been sick that day and stayed home. So Angel had rode the bus over to B&B. Theresa didn't know that, so she was waiting for Angel at the 7-Eleven. And about 3 o'clock, folks saw Theresa stand outside the 7-Eleven, which was on Jones Avenue, holding up a telephone pole. And that's how we say leaning against the telephone pole where I came from. But that was the last time Theresa was seen. Along about the same time Angel Skaggs got over to B&B. After a few hours, Theresa's mother and her stepfather knew something wasn't right when she didn't show up. They both knew that Theresa wasn't the kind to just take off without a word. They knew that Theresa was afraid of the dark, and she didn't like to be by herself at night alone. When she would go over to her dad's house to spend time with him, even though her grandma lived right in the same yard, right next door, her dad had to stay right next to the door, a few feet away, where he could stand there and watch her walk over to her grandpa's house, because she just didn't like to be in the dark by herself. So they knew right off something was seriously wrong. So Mama Betty didn't waste a bit of time. She contacted the police and Theresa's father both. Donald was his name, remember? Now, who immediately they closed his grocery store down and hauled it on over to Oak Hill, where he drove head first right into searching for his daughter. The family knew that she didn't have any reason to run away. Heck, if she went anywhere at all, if she would have went over to her dad's house, but she wouldn't have done that on her own, let alone without at least telling somebody. Of course, like it was back in the day, police pretty much believed that Theresa was a typical teenage runaway. Now, in their defense, I do remember back in those days, quite a few runaways taking place all over the country, but I still to this day don't understand how it would make a difference as to whether or not she was in danger, but according to state police who contacted Holcomb the next morning, they said evidence indicated that the girl may be a runaway rather than a victim of a foul play, but they we're still going to pursue it and an investigation in Oak Hill and local around Golly Bridge too. Now that's where she supposedly reportedly had some friends. But after talking to Betty and Rick, police found out that Theresa took none of her belongings with her. Collins Middle School confirmed to the police that Theresa stayed that day at school all day. Now, as far as Betty was concerned, the runaway theory didn't make a lick of sense. She said that Theresa was looking forward to her birthday on April 6th because she was getting her a new color TV as one of her presents. Now, that was a pretty nice gift back in the day. I remember when the lovely and gracious Mrs. Bentley and I first started out, we had us a nice little 19-inch color TV, and we thought it was something else. We had to use binoculars to see it from across the room, but it worked. Now, anyway, Donna Woods, Theresa's stepmom, did report that Theresa seemed upset during her last 3 weekend visits with them, and I read where Betty had said something was bothering her, but she didn't want to talk about it. Betty figured that Theresa wanted to go back to her former school, but her mother told her that, to go ahead and finish out the year at Collins Middle School in Oak Hill, and then they'd talk about changing schools after the school year. That, at least to me, would be the likely reason that the police may be thinking that she ran away. Now, Theresa Ann's natural father, Hank, said that he noticed Theresa Ann was upset about something prior to her disappearance. He said that he thought that whatever happened started 3 weeks before that she disappeared. He said, too, that she wouldn't tell him what happened, but she asked him if she could come stay with him. So it sounds, like sure enough, that maybe she had run away, but not told anybody, but because she didn't want to go back to that school for some particular reason. Now, there was one other reason that everybody knew Theresa didn't run away, and that was because she had a new boyfriend. Her boyfriend worked part-time at an IGA grocery store, which was directly across from the road from the 7-Eleven at Jones Avenue. Now, the young man said that he hadn't seen Theresa after school or all day. Matter of fact, on the day Theresa disappeared, his father said that he received a call from a girl who he assumed was Theresa, but he wasn't sure. The girl asked if the young man was home, and when his dad said no, she just hung up. After all this, police finally decided to move away from the runaway theory. There hadn't been a child abducted in Oak Hill for over 20 years, and police started wondering if, that was what they were looking at here. Now, what they did think is that Theresa knew and trusted whoever did abduct her. Local press, radio, and newspapers kept Theresa's story alive, and her family even covered Oak Hill and the surrounding areas with Theresa's missing posters, which about every single business had a picture hanging in it in their windows. Despite all of that, along with 8 weeks of searching, Theresa still hadn't been found. Her stepfather, Rick, told the local newspaper, I guess they're doing about all they can, but I don't think they have enough manpower. He wondered why they hadn't called the FBI, which to me would have been a real good question. But it didn't seem like the FBI got that involved in types of things, back in that day for some reason or another. Mr. Holcomb and Betty did contact several national agencies for missing children, but not much of it came of it. In the meantime, it was a long, hard, tough waiting game. Now, Theresa's 14th birthday came and went, and I can't even imagine how her loved ones felt. Then on June 5th, 1986, going on 4 months after Theresa just vaporized into thin air, it was around 8 o'clock in the evening when 2 men who lived at Laurel Creek, named John and Gerald Davis, went on to do some seining for fish bait in nearby creek. Now, I know y'all know what I'm talking about if you're from the mountains. If not, that's where you stretch your net across a creek and go upstream and start flipping rocks and making noise so that all the minnows and hellgrammites and crawpinchers will go down and get caught in the net. Then when you separate them all out, into different containers, I guess, so they don't kill each other, and you got you some good fishing bait right there. So John and Gerald that's what they were up to. Now, while they were walking along, John happened to stumble on a human skull that was part ways in the water along the edge of the creek. Now, we know there weren't no cell phones, so Gerald and John, both of them, I guess they ran back and contacted the Fayette County Sheriff's Office, who rolled up on and sealed the area off and to do some, to do some looking around. And then they went about searching the area all night and into the following morning. They found even more human remains around the area, along with clothing fragments and some jewelry. They also happened to find a long strand of bright red hair, and that's when they had a gut feeling of, who it might be. Everything they found was sent to the state medical examiner's office, where identification was delayed a few days due to the fact that the family had sent Theresa's dental records off to California to be entered into a database for missing children. A few days later, West Virginia State Medical Examiner Irvin Sulphur confirmed what everybody had been dreading, and that the remains were those of Theresa Woods, and that Theresa had been a victim of homicide. The cause of Theresa's death was never released. That tells me that they don't have a whole lot to work with. There's usually a few kooks that crawl up out of the woodwork and start confessing to this kind of thing, and you have to be able to sort them out, and you do that by holding on to some things and keeping them close to the vest. Now, if the cause of death is being held, that may be about all they have, and maybe just a little more, but it's awful as it sounds. They did say that they believe that Theresa's murder was sexually motivated. Of course, we know most murders of young girls and women are, but they kept right on trying to trace Theresa's steps that day to get the timeline. They knew that she was seen last at the 7-Eleven on Jones Avenue, and they knew that she would have walked 6 blocks to where her mom and stepfather worked, but she was found 9 miles away from the 7-Eleven at Laurel Creek and about a quarter mile off the main road. Of course, the lack of physical evidence was probably due to the fact that she was pretty much skeletonized and her bones were scattered around the creek, probably due to animal activity, if I had to guess, and all the clothing and jewelry found around matched what she wore to school that day. Now, that made police believe that she was killed on the day she went missing. The biggest question folks have, besides the who did it, was how'd she get from the 7-Eleven on Jones Avenue to Laurel Creek? Now, how did she get there without being seen by somebody in a vehicle somewhere? In the 9-mile drive, there's only 2 straight shots to get there, and there ain't no turnoffs or intersections anywhere. That means that whoever killed Theresa probably knew the area of Laurel Creek pretty blame good. Police have said that they have some pretty damning evidence, but they can't release it to public. I think that would mean that, they got monster's DNA, possibly. We just don't know who to compare it to. That's what they're kind of indicating to me. Now that they have the genealogy stuff going on, what folks in the mountains call reverse DNA testing, I would bet that whoever it is, if he's still around, be walking around squeaking from having an off-the-chart pucker factor nowadays. Now, by November of 1986, the investigation had all but gone cold. Police departments put out an appeal to anybody with any information about the murder to contact them. And in 2011, the case was passed down to Captain J.L. Cahill as an effort of the West Virginia State Police to re-examine cold cases. He then assigned the case to then Sergeant Jason Davis of the Oak Hill Detachment. And then again, things went quiet. In 2021, the case was again being looked into by the West Virginia State Police, Corporal Jake Kincaid. And he said a new lead was given to police earlier that year. He said he was still investigating it. Then Theresa's case went quiet again. Theresa's family say they'll never give up, no matter how long it takes, and I don't blame them. They still miss her every day. Theresa's murderer, we think it's about to fall apart for you, they say. And people want to know who you are, your name, and how awful a person you truly are. Theresa was so much more than her 13 years than you'll ever be in your entire life. I would pay attention to how people treat you now, because that's not going to last much longer. The clock is ticking and your secret won't stay hidden long. It's past time for somebody to know anything to come forward. That's what they had to say. It's been almost 40 years with no answers, but I can bet you there's one small detail from catching the piece of dog squeeze that did it. And like I said earlier, he's probably walking around with a pucker factor that you couldn't drive a sewing needle through with a sledgehammer. But if you or anybody you know knows anything on the murder of Theresa Ann Wood, please call Crime Stoppers at 304-255-STOP. That's 304-255-7867. All tips are anonymous, and you can submit a tip online as well at www.crimestopperswestvirginia, all one word, .org. Now you can submit there too, anonymously. Folks, I hope you got something out of our story today. If you know anything, please give them a call or give them a message on Crime Stoppers. But, if you got anything of our story today, please rate and review the podcast. Or if you're watching on YouTube or Rumble or even Spotify, throw a like, and don't forget to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening. Come on over to Appalachian Murder, Mystery, or Legend Podcast on Facebook. Or, it's where we talk Appalachian about anything else you want to talk about. I'll be back real soon with another Appalachian Murder, Mystery, and Legend, or Legend, I should say, and I'll see you then.